Greetings, fellow pilgrims. Welcome to our 20th issue of Logosophia magazine, based on the true, the good, and the beautiful, the visual arts. This issue includes, but is not limited to, thoughts on fine art, Beauty and the Beast, animated movies, and more. I would also like to announce that this is my last issue as editor-in-chief. I will be stepping into the role of assistant editor for our new editor-in-chief, Debbie Morgan Robertson. Happy fall! Sarah Levesque, Editor-in-Chief.
What Makes Art by Ian Wilson. Read by Joshua David Ling. Our modern culture seems hell-bent on destroying objective standards of art, beauty, and goodness. Most so-called artists are intent on self-expression, to the point where their art has no meaning to anyone but them. Their art is indistinguishable from the random paint splatter of wild beasts. Others seem to be more concerned with shock value of creating that insults or parodies the good and transcendent. This is not true art, but merely a self-absorbed attempt at rebellion against God. I know I may raise some eyebrows when I say this, but art is not all about self-expression. At least not to the detriment of everything else. Nor is art about some self-absorbed childish petulance, a rebellious middle finger to the so-called establishment. The reason that the works of Da Vinci and Michelangelo are still remembered and celebrated is not primarily because they were revolutionary or provocative, though they frequently were, but because they expressed the transcendent in physical form. They were reaching toward the divine. They celebrated the beauty of the human form, and thus, in a sense, worshipped God who had made the human form, and had embodied the human form in Jesus Christ. Classical art invites one out of oneself to experience the goodness and beauty of nature and God. Even if one does not believe in God, one can appreciate the beauty of the Pietà. Beauty is etched into the human soul. We long for it. Beauty draws us out of ourselves. We want to be drawn in, to become part of the beauty. Art is itself, I believe, an evangelistic tool. People everywhere seek beauty, and it is our job as Christians to show the beauty of God through various means. Art and music being two. We have a responsibility to create good art. God deserves our best, as do our neighbors. Art and music have a catechetical quality as well. What we consume forms and changes us in ways we do not comprehend. Do you want to be conformed to the image of this world or to the image of Christ? Modern art, by contrast, is all about self-expression. The artist is only interested in their own self-interest, rather than trying to express the transcendent. They reach inward rather than outward. They look to themselves and what they think is best, rather than looking to please the viewer. Some take it a step further and positively rebel against truth and goodness in their work. This trend is what I've referred to as a cult of ugliness. I believe it is distinctly demonic. It is chaotic, which is a mark of evil rather than good. It is pure self-obsession, which was the fall of Satan. There is a danger here of 1. Becoming elitist, and 2. Idolatry of beauty. We must be careful that we do not put our aesthetic standards on a pedestal. We cannot look down on others who may not have the same sensibilities. We must not sneer at others from our high horses. We should not use our standards as an excuse to be patronizing. Rather, we must humbly approach the ideal of beauty from our various standpoints, recognizing that others may be doing the same, but from very different starting places, and may be at different places in their own quest. However, I have come to believe it is the Christian duty to combat the cult of ugliness wherever it arises. It is imperative that we avoid making commercial art purely for the purpose of self-expression, and that we make good art. This is our best Testimony.
Of Seen and Unseen by Amanda Pizzolatto. Read by Amanda Pizzolatto. Sometimes the best animated movies look worse than the mediocre ones. Sometimes the story and the visuals are so well done that it seems nothing can compete, even if they get the same crew to work on it. And sometimes it seems we are asked to accept the bottom of the barrel just because there's an intellectual property name attached to it. Yet when we ask for better stories, we are told it looks good, and that's all we need. Unfortunately, no, it's not all we need. Beauty is nothing without substance, nothing without story or truth. Or, in other words, we need the soul. The body is not alive without the soul. Just like our bodies and souls, the story of a movie or show is more important than the visuals, as poor visuals can be overlooked for a good story. However, using beauty to hide an empty story does no good for beauty or the movie. Beauty does fade. It is the story, the soul, that keeps us coming back. That does not mean that beauty is unimportant. It is still important, just like our bodies. We must care for both so that they do their jobs well, but we must place more importance on the soul, the story. This must be done so that the body and the visuals have something to reflect, to show the rest of us. The whole point is for the visuals to show the story, not to hide the lack of one. Unfortunately, many people do use it to hide emptiness, and many more focus only on the beauty, which allows them to get away with it. This is sad, as beauty is good, but when used for the wrong reasons, it taints how we view beauty. But it could be that we are also focusing on false beauty instead of real beauty. What is the difference between false beauty and real beauty? The differences typically lie in the lack of soul behind the beauty, but also in changing oneself to fit a sterile definition of beauty rather than accepting beauty in all its wildness. For instance, take the planet Earth. We can all agree it is a beautiful planet, but we can also all agree that there are terrifying aspects to it as well. What if beauty in its truest form is wild and terrifying? It seems plausible. After all, one cannot look upon the face of God without falling to the ground in fear, and He is the most beautiful of all. Then there is the notion that the standards of beauty mean we should all look the same, and that is entirely wrong. Beauty comes in as many forms as the animals and plants that share our planet with us. What needs to change, then, is our attempts to limit beauty into a generic box. We need to let it out, to let it grow. You cannot admire the beauty of the trees if you keep them saplings. What then does this mean for the visual arts? I think Toy Story is just one example of this phenomenon. The first movie doesn't look as good as other animated movies, but with each installment the visuals were allowed to become better. Other movies produced by the company benefited from this as well, and while there are a few movies that were not as good as the others, overall they have a good soul to them. Though yes, rewatching the first movie might invoke twinges of discomfort due to how it looks in comparison to the newer movies, being able to see how they have progressed makes us appreciate their growth all the more. And that is because they didn't rely solely on visuals to tell a story. They told a good story, and the visuals reflected that. For what is on the inside will eventually show up on the outside. Just ask Dorian Gray.
Holy Heroes, Albrecht Durer, by Ian Wilson. Read by Ian Wilson. While he is not as well known as Leonardo da Vinci or Raphael, Albrecht Dürer's contribution to Renaissance art are no less significant. Born in 1471 to a goldsmith in Nuremberg in what is now Germany, Dürer did not care for his father's trade and rather followed his own passion, painting. While displeased, his father supported his decision. For 3 years, Dürer trained under the great German artist Michael Wohlgemuth. Under Wohlgemuth, Dürer learned to design prints, for the newly invented printing press, a skill which he would revolutionize. Once his 3 years of tutelage were complete, Durer traveled to Basel, Switzerland, for additional training. He then returned to Nuremberg in 1494, where he married Agnes Frey in an arranged marriage. Durer had a gift for delicacy. All his works display a surprising level of fine detail and precision, which made him a popular artist of the time period. He was fascinated by the human form, which can be seen throughout his work. He even wrote 4 books on human proportion and a book on geometry of perspective for artists. He believed in capturing the created world in all its glory, that we may reflect the glory of God. He even served as court artist for 2 Holy Roman emperors. In all things, however, Durer put God first. Nuremberg was known as a center not only of artistic scholarship, but also philosophy and theology. Thus Durer took a keen interest in theology, particularly in the Protestant Reformation. Durer suffered from a troubled conscience, and the doctrine of salvation by faith was music to his ears. He frequently voiced support for Martin Luther and the other reformers in his letters, which brought Durer into sharp criticism of his contemporaries. This did not deter Durer, however. Durer passed from this life in 1528, probably due to a malaria infection. He left behind an incredible legacy of detail and beautiful artwork for the glory of God and the edification of others. Upon receiving word of Durer's death, Luther wrote, "It is natural and right to weep for so excellent a man. May we, like Durer, strive to add to the beauty of the world."
The First Barn Jacket Morning in Autumn by Lawrence Mack in Texas Hall. Read by Joshua David Ling. Dawn, windy and cold. The first barn jacket morning. Wild geese singing south.
Beast Wars Transformers, a tribute to a 90s classic, by T.K. Wilson. 3D animation was brand new in the mid-90s. Computers were making enormous strides in what they were able to do, and in 1996, Toy Story proved that they could make movies. Technically speaking, the VeggieTales episode Where's God When I'm Scared beat them out by 3 years, but I digress. Hasbro, the Pawtucket, Rhode Island toy giant, was looking for a new way to revitalize the Transformers franchise since it had petered out in the West after about 1990, with Japan and the rest of Asia keeping the cartoon afloat, with some truly bizarre entries. The decision was made to make a show about characters who turn into animals, capitalizing on the craze for vaguely environmental themes in cartoons and the attention being paid to endangered species. Hasbro also chose 3D animation, a new and flashy technology, for the accompanying cartoon and hired Canada's Mainframe Animation for the task. This cartoon, Beast Wars Transformers, premiered September 16, 1996, and became an instant success, earning praise for its writing, animation, and sound design and voice acting. Toys flew off the shelves, ensuring its future on the airwaves until 1999, when it was replaced by its sister show, Beast Machines. But we don't talk about Beast Machines. I've come to understand that the writers, Larry DiTilio and Bob Forward, were flying entirely by the seats of their pants. Hasbro had given them some instructions on what they needed to do, like adding characters and references to the original Transformers show, but largely left them alone. Mr. DiTilio and Mr. Forward wrote pretty much what they wanted, with input from the Transformers fan community, leading to an electric environment. They were assisted in this electric feeling by the crack voice acting team. The actors performed in one large room, like how they recorded in old-fashioned radio shows. This allowed all kinds of shenanigans in the recording booth and a chance for all the actors to become real friends. This warm feeling of family and friends is part of what made Beast Wars such a success. To this day, the entire cast speaks with well-deserved pride about their work on the show. Beast Wars chronicled the adventures of the Maximals, led by Optimus Primal, and their efforts to safeguard the mysterious planet they landed on from the evil Predacons led by Megatron. Originally nothing but a group of explorers and scientists, the Maximals were forced to become heroes as Megatron's ambitions grew to encompass changing all of Transformers history. Both sides of the conflict were populated by a colorful cast of characters, all uniquely written and fleshed out. Maximals, in particular, had a chemistry between all the different characters that has never really been matched by any cartoon since, while the Predacons swing from hilariously incompetent to how the hey did they get this past the censors dark. As an undiagnosed autistic person, Beast Wars characters made me feel safe, as bizarre as that sounds. The characters of the show were symbols of justice and heroism, things that I believed in and aspired to be as brave and resourceful as the characters on the show. Writing fanfic about this show is what got me into writing, and the quality of the writing and acting gave me a passion for finding and promoting quality cartoons. Ultimately, I believe that kids deserve the best, and Beast Wars is one of the reasons why. Kids shouldn't be talked down to or plunked in front of a TV showing whatever CGI slop passes for cartoons these days. They deserve shows that respect them and the grown-ups they will be someday. Of course, ships have long sailed since the 90s, but I think it's important for us millennials to remember that nostalgia isn't for us, it's for our kids. We can carp and whine all day long about things not being the way they used to be, but it's our job to get back to the quality we remember as best we can for the sake of our kids. Transform or roll out, friends. We've got a future to fight for.
The Worth of a Beast by Amanda Pizzolatto. It seems a certain kind of discourse surrounding Disney's Beauty and the Beast has reared its ugly head again. This particular discourse is of the notion that Gaston was in the right, that he is the hero. Technically, he should be if we looked at the story based on the kinds of heroes we've had before: tall, muscular, and handsome. But see, that's kind of the point. He's supposed to be, but he's not. If we were to compare Gaston's actions with those of other heroes like Aragorn, Peter Pevensie, Superman, Spider-Man, and even the Beast himself, we can see exactly where he goes wrong. Aragorn, Peter Pevensie, Superman, and Spider-Man are considered some of the most perfect superheroes, making mostly all the right choices. Aragorn and Superman were basically perfect from the first moment we meet them, whereas we see Peter Pevensie and Spider-Man start as boys and grow into their hero roles. Spider-Man, in fact, starts off a little like Gaston, acting selfishly at first, which cost him dearly. That changed Spider-Man, and he decided to embrace the role of hero wholeheartedly. Gaston, on the other hand, is so used to getting his way with just about everything that he can't conceive the notion that he could be in the wrong, much less that Belle wouldn't want to be with him. He was so driven by seeking the best for himself that he never stopped to consider true goodness, even though that was what Belle represented. The Beast only became a monster and a problem to the village when Gaston realized he was a rival, despite the Beast being the only one really in line for Belle's heart. Speaking of Belle, you can tell the stark difference between the Beast and Gaston and how they two treat her. When Gaston first interacts with her, he takes her book away and tosses it into the mud. He later places his muddy, stinky feet on top of her open book when he is in her house to propose to her, with the wedding venue set up and waiting just outside. He has a vision that has her in it, but he never truly includes her, and he doesn't take her passions and dreams into consideration. He barely listens to her as it is. Beast, on the other hand, gives her a whole library. He feeds her passions and dreams. He even enjoys listening to her read and talk about the books. Seeing her smile makes him smile. By allowing her to be herself, Beast gets to know the real Belle and truly falls in love with her. Of course, this can only happen after they argue with each other, and she thanks him for saving her life. Only once that barrier is broken do they truly get to know each other. But Gaston is so full of himself, so sure that everyone likes him, that he doesn't stop to consider that she might turn down his 5-minute engagement, which, as we should be well aware, is not the right way to treat a woman, especially later when he tries to coerce her into marriage by threatening to put her father into an asylum. It should be obvious that she would be miserable in a marriage with him, as if Gaston cares. So then, this begs the question, why do some people think that Gaston is the hero? Heck, is this question even a serious one, or clickbait for attention? Yes, I had considered that before writing this article, but as I could not find the tweet again, I can't say for sure. As such, I am writing as if it is serious, but knowing how this world seems to be fixated on other bad takes, I wouldn't be surprised if it was. Which brings me back to the first question. Why would anyone think that Gaston should be the hero, especially when the movie goes out of its way to show that he is the villain? Is it partially due to the rise in he's evil but he's hot trope that seems to be permeating through current stories? Generations before us have fought so hard to get people to look at people's characters rather than their looks. Looks are still important. Belle still got a handsome man. But the character, the soul of a person, is what we should be focusing on to base our like or dislike of a person. Pride and Prejudice covers this, as well as touching on the importance of looks. In fact, you could say Disney's Beauty and the Beast is more Pride and Prejudice than it is Beauty and the Beast, especially when you consider the original fairy tale, where the fairy who changed the prince into the beast was the villain. That being said, when you do compare the beast to Gaston, you are shown where one chooses Belle over himself, and the other chooses himself over Belle. As such, despite the two basically starting out equally rude and demanding, one decided Belle was worth changing for, putting them in on opposing sides at the end of the movie. Gaston considered Belle a prize to be won, but the beast saw her life. Her happiness was worth fighting for, even dying for. That is true love, and it saved him from the spell. He then is rewarded with the breaking of his curse, while Gaston was punished with a great fall. This then is the lesson the beast needed to learn. This is also the lesson we must take from the story, and why the beast is truly worthy of the title of hero. Der Kuss, written by Noelle McMahon, read by Amanda Pizzolatto, a reflection on the painting by Gustav Klimt. Encircled, blended gold on gold, she disappears in his embrace, yet remains supremely herself, an ecstasy envisioned on her face. Twinned about her, only later you notice him, hidden by radiance, he worships with us, the supreme beauty that is her. We all share, he alone possesses.
Our controversy corner question for this issue is, what does visual art mean for a Christian?
Non-denominational Christian, represented by Deborah Robertson. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Genesis 1:27a, ESV Bible. You cannot separate visual art from humanity. God created us in his image, and our bodies are a reflection of something heavenly. The way my husband delights in my body is all the proof I need of the reality that people are art. But like everything after the fall, this has been corrupted in a myriad of ways. Our culture worships the body instead of the one who designed, created, and gave it. God has specific ways the gift of visual art of another person is meant to be enjoyed, and predictably the rules for that are broken and it's twisted into something no one should consider art. Ultimately, visual art for Christians is to take what God has given us and use it for beauty to be reflected back to him, whether that be marriage, painting, embroidery, etc. Whatever we do as Christians should be for the glory of God.
Presbyterian Church Independent, Joshua David Ling. Christians are sub-creators under God, given a dominion mandate under the Noahic covenant to bring the promise of Christ to bear in every area of life. That includes the beauty we're to sub-create for visual beholding. While there is little written by Reformed Presbyterians on the subject, there should be more, especially considering the focus on pushing scriptural ideas to every area of life. Visual art is a medium that has been largely looked down upon, albeit without much thought, since the Reformation. While I maintain, with exceptions and some slight changes in semantics, the Westminster's prohibitions on extravagant church decoration for the specific sake of liturgical worship, I believe a full iconoclastic approach spits in the face of the one who created visual beauty for good and to bring glory to himself.
Roman Catholic, represented by Sarah Levesque. When reflecting on Christianity and the visual arts, it is striking to me how quickly religious art bloomed forth in the age of the early martyrs, and how it continues to this day, particularly when I consider how Christianity is rooted in the Jewish traditions, one of which was that creating art of any sort was a sin unless it was directly commanded by God for the temple, which he commanded to be very ornate. Despite this lack of visually artistic roots, Christian art flourished from a very early time, despite the persecution of its creators and the destruction of countless pieces of art. In those early times, Christians sought to create pictures of Jesus and the saints. Later, they embellished their great cathedrals with extensive art, as I discussed in my article. Always their art pointed toward God. Still later, Christian artists focused on other things, but always pointed toward the true, the good, and the beautiful. For are those not the marks of God? Still today, Christian artists of all sorts, visual, verbal, musical, etc., reach for their true, the good, and the beautiful in their artwork, and in doing so still point to God, as Christian should in all his works.
The Knights of Adonai, Part 8. Arrested by Joshua David Ling. The sheriff came and listened to all that was to be said. He said he would investigate these claims that brought much dread. Several weeks followed, with very little to show. Owain wanted to ask more questions, but he didn't rightly know if he would hinder the investigation or help in any real way. But then everything came to a head on one portentous day. It started small, but people began to gather outside Talon's courts. Many didn't know why. They thought they were there for sport. But some wore somber expressions, and others seemed outright on edge. Soon many began to shout at Talon's castle gates, demanding him to come out at once and face their mob dictate. The sheriff soon arrived, and with his men brought everything to peace. After conversing with a few of the elders, he realized that at least he would need to speak with Talon, and the crowd likely wouldn't obey. If he was to try and enter alone, he took a deep breath and prayed. Brother Owain had been watching nearby and approached the sheriff to speak. "What are they saying they want, brother? What is it that they seek?" "They have somehow heard tell of what you and I know, of Lord Talon's unscrupulous deeds. They wish for swift justice now. I'm seeking to work for peace." A few people then in the crowd began to approach the gates, with anger burning in their eyes and a spirit of haste. Then came the sound of creaking hinges as Talon's gates swung wide. The Lord himself stood proudly there, his knights on either side. The crowd surged forward as one mass, their patience worn quite thin. The sheriff raised his hands for peace above the growing din. Just then a horn call split the air, its notes both clear and strong. A rider came at breakneck speed through channels of the throng. A royal seal gleamed bright and true upon the parchment seal. The sheriff broke the waxen seal and stood to read it whole. "By order of his majesty, Lord Talon stands accused. His lands and titles hereby stripped. From realm he stands excused. Forever banished from these shores, to Bristol he must go. The sheriff's men shall see him there, this justice to bestow." The crowd fell silent at these words. though victory seemed won clear. Something in the timing struck a chord of nagging fear. As Talon and his escort left, no triumph could be found. For though justice seemed to reign that day, suspicion lingered round. Through whispered words in tavern halls and glances shared in streets, all knew that something deeper lay beneath these swift deceits. But Talon rode toward Bristol port, his fate now sealed by crown, while doubt and questions remained behind to haunt the troubled town. Come, men of Christ, be strong. Words by Josh Bishop, 2020. Music by George J. Elvey, 1868. Sung by Joshua David Ling. Come, men of Christ, be strong, stand firm and hold your ground. Take courage, though the battle's long, the victor has been crowned. Advance the cause of Christ, once more unto the breach. Make sharp your swords and join the fight, for triumph is in reach. Come, men of Christ, enjoy God's given all that's fair. The things of earth are for your joy, received with thankful prayer. Take heart, glad men, have cheer. Let loud your laughter ring, and live as rowdy cavaliers for covenant and king. Come, join the bridegroom's feast, the table's set to dine, filled full with ale and fatty meats, and rich with bread and wine. Lift up your glasses high, and toast no king but Christ. Then eat your fill and fix your eyes on him, our sacrifice. Sing, men of Christ, sing loud, our banner is the Lord. First in, last out, and laughing loud, we work for our reward. One day we'll hear well done, and all our striving cease. But till our lifelong race is run, we'll fight and laugh and feast. Musical Musings. Come, men of Christ, be strong. By Joshua David Ling. It was October 2020. Any sense of major dread anyone had over the COVID-19 pandemic had slowly been drifting off. But many of the tyrannical lockdowns continued. Within this context, Fight Laugh Feast, a Christian news and content company out of Moscow, Idaho, held an event in Tennessee. They were attacked by bureaucrats from all sides, seeking to shut down a peaceful gathering of Christians, mostly families and young men, from singing and praising God, and listening to preaching and intelligent talks on the world as it currently was. The shutdowns were so bad, the conference lost its initial venue and had to relocate to an indoor soccer stadium that was graciously suggested by a friend of a friend. The resulting singing of psalms mingled with loud joy and cheer shook the walls and launched Fight Laugh Feast into the stratosphere. Before this conference, Josh Bishop, a man from Michigan who had studied at New St. Andrews in Moscow, Idaho, was unable to attend the conference, but he was touched by the hard work and joy exuded by the Fight Laugh Feast hosts, and they inspired him to write a purposefully masculine hymn. He sent it to Pastor Toby Sumter, co-host of FLF's flagship show Cross Politic, who suggested a few changes. Little did Josh know, They would bring this hymn to the conference, and it would become the de facto theme song for the Fight, Laugh, Feast conference, and be sung by many Reformed denominations all over the world. He wrote, "Come, men of Christ, be strong," to the familiar tune Diademata, commonly sung with the words, "Crown him with many crowns." And by the end of the conference, it was passed out en masse. Right before the closing doxology, this hymn was sounded joyously by the rowdy and raucous crowd of gathered blue-collar and white-collar men, along with the ones in their care. Their voices could not be silenced by tyrants, not when they had something so important as praising the Lord on their lips. The first verse is about fighting for what is right with our joy in the Lord. The second verse is about laughing, not caustically, but truly knowing that in the end, all evil is a passing shadow. And the last verse is about feasting, not forsaking the good and wonderful gifts God gives us on a daily basis, but thankfully contemplating his immensely great gift giving when we deserved far worse. Great is our God, and here's to fighting, laughing, and feasting for years to come, and until God brings us home.
I should probably change the view so that people can see both of us. There we go. Hopefully that works. All right. Well, hello, everybody. I am Sarah Levesque, and with me today I have Rachel Atterholt.
Hi.
Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Can you repeat that?
Okay. Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Oh, yes, I am. Yes, I am Rachel Atterholt. I'm, let's see, I'm 28. I'm a full-time actor and author, and I am just finished with writing a book.
Excellent. And what is the name of this book?
So the name of the book is Full Moon Chronicles. That's the name of the series, and it's book 1, and that is called Waning Moon.
Awesome. So let's rewind. When did you start writing, like originally?
I originally started writing when I was about 7 or 8. I fell in love with writing when I read The Hobbit, which was the first non-picture book I ever read at 6. And I fell in love with stories in general. And so I was just like, I want to write my own stories and come up with my own stories. So if I wasn't like creating stories with like puppets and stuff, I was writing them. So it was about 7 or 8 when I started actually writing them. When I started writing Full Moon Chronicles was when I was 13.
Got it. Okay. So tell us about those Full Moon Chronicles.
So Full Moon Chronicles is my fantasy adventure series. It's for young adults, but it's more for the younger side of the younger adults. It takes place in a mythical town called Mystique, Oregon, and it is about the life and times of Sam Tyler, who learns that not only can she can control the 4 elements, which is earth, water, fire, and air, but also she is supposed to be the leader of all that is basically good, the good army, and she has to fight against the evil army, the Belzebans. And so, yes, she has to lead the Legion and fight against the Belzebans, and basically has to learn to control her own darkness within her and fight against her own secrets, and learns who she can trust and who she can't trust and all of those things. And there's a boy with fire eyes and a dark secret, and there's kind of some intrigue going on there.
All right. That does sound really interesting. So how did you come up with this book specifically?
I came up with it it's the weirdest thing. I went to bed one night and Slayer, who is the boy with fire eyes and the dark secret, he came to me fully formed. I believe he is basically an amalgamation of all of the male characters that I have read and watched in my from there. Um, because I grew up watching Lord of the Rings and, like Rambo and all those kind of movies and 80s action movies and fantasy movies and things like Willow and all kinds of fun movies and scary movies and all kinds of things of these really cool action hero guys. And so Slayer, this character, came to me and was just like, hey, I want to be written. And I was like, okay, we need to figure out a story first. So he was the first character that came to me, and the whole story kind of revolved around that. And Sam came to me a little bit later. So it was interesting how Sam, who's the main character, she didn't come to me till after.
All right. So what was it like writing your first book?
It was so interesting, so challenging. So it was during the Twilight phase. Everybody was talking about Twilight. And so I had written the first draft and I had loved it. But then I had read Twilight and I was like, oh, I need to write it more like Twilight. And no, you can't. No, you need to not plagiarize your own work. You need to not plagiarize other books. You need to keep true to your, the spirit of your own work. And so that was a whole fun adventure. And I had to realize that fan fiction should stay in fan fiction territory and your work should stay in your work territory. So that was an interesting adventure. It's such a fun adventure though, and so learning. It's the challenges that come with it and trying to navigate your own world and your own characters, and they're all different like parts of you. So you're trying to figure out different parts of your own self and try and be like, oh, how do I figure out this and what do I do about this and thing. And also because I started when I was 13 and I just finished it now. I mean, it has grown with me. So Sam she's 16. And like I thought she was so mature when I first started writing her. Now I think she's just little young lady. I'm like, oh, you poor child. You just sit here. You have so much to grow. You have so much to learn. So it's such an interesting kind of adventure, sort of kind of challenge. And it's like there's so many different things, especially when you're growing with your own work. That's a whole other beast within itself.
Yeah, for sure. So, remind me, are you in the middle of publishing or have you already published?
So I've submitted to a few publishing agents.
Okay. So, what way are you hoping to get your book published?
So I'm hoping to get published the traditional route. If I hear back and and they don't, for whatever reason, we don't work, or after a while, the traditional publishing route just doesn't work for me, I will eventually, self-publish.
Okay. Awesome. Are you planning on writing more? I mean, I think you already answered this. You said this was the first of a series.
Yes, this is the first book of a 5-book series. I have already written I haven't written book 5. I've written 2, 3, and 4, and they're all in various stages of editing. I've also written a whole bunch of other books, and those are in various stages of editing. I've written a couple novels, a couple fantasy stories, a couple sci-fi stories. I've written a random Western because
Why not?
because I was like, oh, the challenge. see if I could write a Western without any fantasy because I love fantasy. I was like, I can write Western without putting any fantasy in it. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Yeah, so I've written a whole bunch of things, but for Full Moon Chronicles, yeah, I haven't written book 5 because I know book 5 is just gonna be my that's gonna be the hardest probably challenge for me.
Okay.
I'm getting there.
Mm-hmm.
I am getting there because eventually I'm gonna run out of things to edit and rewrite. Now I'm on book 2 of the rewrite, and I'm like, okay, once we're running out of things to edit and rewrite. So eventually I'm gonna have to write book 5.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get there eventually.
All right. So, why do you write?
I write because I love the art of storytelling. That's another reason why I'm an actor too, because I just love the various forms of storytelling. I love all the things you can do with storytelling. I love the truth that you can tell in the storytelling. Just you can be your very true self in it, and you don't have to hide yourself when you're telling your stories. And you can be many different facets of yourself. Like I was saying earlier, that the characters are like different facets of you. So you can show different persons of who you are in the stories. And so it's just different truths. And so it's storytelling is just it's I just love the art of storytelling. It's just so beautiful and creative and fun. And it's yeah, I just storytelling is great.
All right. What helps you to write? For some people, it's music or pets or reading or a specific pen.
For me, it's reading. The more I read, the more I get inspired to write. The less I read, the less I find myself writing. It's not like I used to get into like, oh, if I read, I'm gonna want to plagiarize because I got into the whole Twilight issue. But I was 12, so I was crazy. Now that I'm older, it's easier for me to be like, no, no, no. I can read this book and I can just get inspired to write my own stories. And it just inspires me to write and be like, I love the world of writing and the world of storytelling. And so that inspires me to write my own worlds and to stay in my own worlds. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot my characters are over here and they still want to be talked about and told. And so the more I read, the more I want to write. So when I get into like reading slumps, man, my writing really falls off. Yeah.
Okay. Who are some of your favorite authors?
So Tolkien is one of my favorites. I've read almost everything he's written. One of my other favorites is Stephen King. I love his works. Even though I don't always recommend because there is some stuff in his books. I do love his
Fair.
works. I do love his works. I also love Robert Leckie, and he is a World War II writer who fantastic. I love him. And he kind of inspired a bit of kind of the Slayer background. And yeah, J.K. Rowling for sure as well. I read Harry Potter almost every year. I just absolutely love Harry Potter. That's one of the things that, it's one of those stories that just reminds me of why storytelling is so magical. For sure.
Are you inspired by anyone else that maybe isn't a writer?
Oh gosh. I'm definitely inspired by lots of like actors. Um, like I love studying Shakespeare. I mean, I know okay, so he's a writer. So he is a writer, but he is more of a playwright. So I love studying like playwrights and theater and things like that. And I love studying actors and how they perform on stage and screen. And I love studying um, poetry and things like that. And so I like studying different forms of writing than just like novel writing, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so let's branch out. Because I was just talking about like books. I love Robert Frost. I love Poe. I love Shakespeare. I love Milton. Um, I have to give a shout out to one of my best friends, Abby Jones, who just came out with a book, Stoneheart, and I love her. She helped me write. If it wasn't for her, I would not have figured out that my book was fan fiction. She lovingly told me, your book might be a little too Twilight. And I was like, oh. um yeah, so I like studying different, like I said, I like studying different forms of storytelling. So if it be an actor on stage, I like studying the script and being like, oh, what are they doing, how are they doing that, and then studying it. And like I do that for fight scenes. So I'm like, oh, how do they perform this fight scene? And then working it into script form and then working it into how I did it in the book. That's how I can write it in the book, because that's the only way I can write fight scenes in my books, because they're so impossible to do. I like, so any form of storytelling I like studying. I really enjoy that.
Excellent. Okay. What has writing taught you?
Writing has taught me, oh my gosh, writing has taught me that there is so much more to life than just my very small kind of existence. You know, there is a whole magical world out there beyond. Um, I mean, writing has taught me that if it wasn't for writing, I wouldn't have read the Bible. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
If it wasn't for writing, I wouldn't be saved. If it wasn't for writing, I wouldn't have fallen in love with storytelling or have lived the life that I have now, or have um I wouldn't literally be on this planet right now. Um it, it's writing like has saved me in so many different forms, and just it's so powerful. It's incredible. I it I'm getting emotional. But writing it really has shown me, it's shown me how powerful it can be and how magical it can be, and just if you let it work through you, just the many different ways that it can express itself.
That makes sense. Well, this one ends up being a little bit tricky. Do you go back and reread your writing after it's completed? So after you're done with the editing and all of that, do you go back and reread your stuff?
I do actually. I uh I actually enjoy, it's funny, I actually enjoy rereading my works. Once I actually started reading this recent book that I finished, because all the other books are still works in progress, but I try to read them at least once in a reader mindset and be like, just enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm not writing for myself, then who am I writing for? So I try to at least read them like one time and enjoy them. So I do read them. I do enjoy them. And I do like them. And I'm enjoying the one so far.
Awesome. People are so divided on that topic.
Right. Yeah, I get it. I can't. So it's interesting because for acting, I can't watch my own work. I get so judgmental of my own work. And my parents are like gushing over it. They're like, "Oh, you're so great." And I'm like, I could have chosen a million different facial expressions, and I went with that one. And that one's on camera forever. Cool. And meanwhile, in the book, I'm like, oh, that's good. It's fun. I don't know why it's different for writing. I think it's because eventually I could always go back and fix it or whatever. But if I'm not enjoying myself writing, and also the thing is, I've been writing for so long that like if I don't enjoy it at this point, then why am I still doing it? You know?
Mm-hmm. What is your advice for writers?
Keep writing. It does not matter if you do not like your writing. Keep writing. You will find slumps. You will find there are points when you don't like your writing, you are tired of your writing, you are having like writer's blocks. Literally just writing something on the page just helps get through that. Just keep writing something. Whether it be something random or something that's a part of the book or it doesn't matter. Just literally keep writing. And then also keep reading because reading does help with building your worlds. And so just expand your world building.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Stay tuned. Hopefully be new soon. You can find any information on my website at rachelatterholt.com. And I will be posting any news and any information that you might find there. And yeah, hopefully we'll hear something soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Look Up by Sarah Levesque. I love old churches, soaring works of art, adorned on every surface with visual abundance that inspires awe. Even the churches that were whitewashed by the complete misinterpretation of Vatican II still maintain their splendid stained glass windows, often bearing phrases such as the Transfiguration or Donnez les femmes de Notre Dame, given by the women of Our Lady Parish. As I wander these old churches, my soul is moved by the beauty I see, while my mind is moved by the thought of the people who helped build them. My experience is limited to New England, Montreal, and France, hence the French inscription. But I imagine it's the same spirit across Christendom of old, those towering steeples, the echoing chambers so colorful, and everything pulling your gaze either to the tabernacle that holds the Word made flesh or skyward toward heaven. Isn't it amazing how detailed those old, even ancient artists were in their work? The light and shadow, the specificity of each element in each scene, the choice of each panel of glass and each shade of paint, the precision of the stonework. Whole essays could be written on any of them in any single cathedral. Many of them seem to me better than museums, for each church is a cohesive whole rather than fragments brought together. To be rushed through such a splendid testament to the creativity of man, giving tribute to God, would be a shame. And yet, when is there enough time to see even one such church fully? And those men, those creative men and women who built those great tributes to God, were they not themselves a testament to his greatness? Those who could create did with care, precision, and love. Those who could not gave of their money as they were able, a coin or two here or there for some, full funding of a stained glass window, altarpiece, or fresco for others. I've seen windows that were funded by various craftsman guilds, windows like the one I mentioned before, funded by the women of a church from a town or two over, and windows funded by the abbot of a monastery. The windows, more than anything else, often have their donors built right in, preserving their names for the ages. But I imagine the rest of each splendid old church is the same, funded, built, and adorned with love. In 2017, I was blessed enough to go on a church-hopping pilgrimage across France for 2 weeks. As I prowled through each, awestruck, I tried to take in every detail, but they were too immense. The splendor and the history of centuries surrounded me with a strange sort of calm overwhelm. 3 years later, mere weeks before the pandemic, I got to spend a weekend visiting the great churches of Montreal. I remember visiting Holy Sacrament Shrine in Montreal, completed in 1894, and being amazed at all the beautiful works of art that adorned the walls and ceilings. All this wonder, this splendor, to give glory and praise to God who created all things. Let us use these great works of art as they were intended, to remind us to worship God, to give Him glory and praise in whatever way we have to offer, big or small, accomplished or amateur, be it by creating art, helping our fellow man, or partaking in the Lord's Supper as He bade us. We hope you've enjoyed the autumn 2024 issue of Logosophia magazine, focused on visual art. If you have, please let us know on our website, logosophiamag.com. Join us for our next issue, Winter 2025, focused on faith and science, anthropology and God. The deadline for submissions is December 6th, 2024.